So I've lived in the UAE since I was 7 years old. Now, when most people think about Dubai and the UAE, the first things that usually come to mind are fancy buildings and luxurious lifestyles. However, none of this would have been possible without the migrant blue-collar community. They are the silent support system of the nation and form an extremely crucial part of the economy. Growing up, I've had the privilege of interacting with people from various backgrounds and different walks of life. One such person was Sabina, the girl in this picture. So Sabina used to work as a cleaner in one of the office buildings that I visited quite regularly. She was someone who was very close to my age, and so we ended up striking up a rapport. We interacted quite regularly, and one day, out of curiosity, I just asked her why she decided to move to Dubai. And her story was honestly heart-wrenching. It opened my eyes to the realities that these job seekers face on a daily basis. Sabina was someone who had to look for employment at a very, very young age because she had to become the breadwinner of her family. Coming from a small town in Nepal, she had access to very minimal job opportunities, and as a result of that, she decided to take a leap of faith and look for employment abroad. So she was someone that was extremely passionate about sales, and she wanted to grow in that field and move up the ladder. But she even had this dream of becoming a manager one day. So she reached out to a recruitment agent in her home country who had promised her this very opportunity. Sabina ended up paying this recruitment agent nearly £2,400 in advance, only to end up as a cleaner, earning £200 a month. This was a huge hit for her. She was someone that had to take majority of her 2-year employment contract period only to be able to repay this debt. I've met English teachers from Nigeria who work as toilet cleaners in malls. And I've met software engineers from the Philippines who are working as waiters to make ends meet. There are 4 million blue-collar workers in the UAE, 26 million in the GCC, and many more worldwide who share similar stories. Hiring in the blue-collar sector has remained the same for decades, with not much being done to change it. However, over 15% of those in forced labor globally are migrant workers. This is because in most countries, large networks of middlemen influence the hiring process and prey on the financial desperation of these workers. Employers and job seekers have to cross 6 layers of agents, sub-agents, and individual brokers before an employee is actually hired. This lack of direct communication causes serious gaps in accuracy and transparency. Many workers are misinformed, making them susceptible to exploitation and fraud. They're encouraged to emigrate on work visas that are completely unrelated to the jobs they actually wish to pursue, or on tourist visas, which results in them becoming undocumented economic migrants. Many job seekers end up taking employment that they're overqualified for, which is underpaid and at times unsafe. They take loans and mortgage their assets in the hopes of earning a greater salary and providing a better life for their families. Unfortunately, they are sold a dream, which is very, very far from reality. And this kind of abuse and exploitation by middlemen is unacceptable and unethical. To tackle this, I wanted to come up with a solution that would help these workers make informed decisions to avoid exploitative situations. So I founded ZoEasy, a venture that looks at educating and matching migrant blue-collar job seekers to ethical employment opportunities. We provide job seekers with a fair idea of where they fit in the job market based on their skills, abilities, and basic expectations. We also educate them on the pros and cons of migration, working conditions, and cultural similarities and differences. This creates a system that is more transparent and more productive for both employers and for job seekers. But this was not an easy journey. It was really, really difficult to implement. This is because we had to contend with the unethical tactics of recruitment agencies and certain employers who refused to pilot a set of transparent placements simply because it would drive up their costs and eat into their profits. They had implemented processes that were completely against the norm and insisted upon charging job seekers. And they would base a lot of their hiring decisions on meaningless attributes such as complexion, race, and religion. So it was a difficult journey, and I had to pivot and restructure my business many, many times, but eventually found my way and was able to enter high-demand industries such as construction and e-commerce. Here, with a larger base of purpose-driven employers, we were able to establish stronger recruitment standards, and were able to build more supportive and diverse work cultures. Through this effort, we were able to impact over 70,000 job seekers, but in the grand scheme of things, 70,000 is still an extremely small number. So starting at a grassroots level really gives you a lot of exposure and insight into how things work on the ground. However, this is nowhere near enough to be able to create impact and tackle this issue at a regional or global scale. Which brings me to the question, why hasn't this been addressed at a macro level? Exploitation has been prevalent in this space for decades, but there hasn't really been much done to address it. So now I've interacted with my fair share of government departments, and honestly, sometimes it felt like I was talking to a brick wall. But there are some governments that are genuinely taking steps to make a difference and try to help these beneficiaries. However, a lot of the policies that they've implemented tend to be counterproductive simply because they're unaware of the ground reality. One example that immediately comes to mind is from a few years ago, where a few state governments in India had implemented a new policy to be able to reduce the number of middlemen and, as a result, curb illegal recruitment activity in their regions. So this new policy involved creating a special license that would allow recruitment agencies to work directly with the government on migration and to facilitate more employment abroad, specifically in the blue-collar space. But this new policy also entailed the fact that in order to get this special license, these recruitment agencies needed to pay £50,000 as a down payment. Now that led to two scenarios. You had one scenario where recruitment agencies that could afford this amount would pay this amount, but then would charge job seekers exorbitant fees just to be able to make up that expense of £50,000. And in the second scenario, you had some agencies and individual middlemen who didn't really have the ability to afford this down payment, so instead ramped up their illegal recruitment activity even further just to be able to counteract the consequences that this new policy could apply. So rather than implement policies like this without really understanding what the consequences are for their beneficiaries, it is imperative that governments actually look at alternatives and grassroots initiatives that are currently there in the market and that have implemented a proof of concept to impact their target beneficiaries. One example is the UAE government itself. They've recently started implementing accelerator programs across different sectors and industries to be able to bring in new age startups that can help with multiple areas, including skill development and ethical employment. Another example of that is the UN's International Organization for Migration. They are one of the biggest multilateral agencies in the world and have influence with governments all over. But in order to implement the right training programs, particularly post-departure and pre-arrival training programs for this community, they needed to understand who that beneficiary was. So they took an active role to be able to meet with different grassroots initiatives, including ZoEasy, to be able to understand the job seeker's mindset and to be able to implement direct communication channels with these job seekers. The blue-collar community is the backbone of every economy. Yet, in this sector, unethical behavior and exploitation still remains extremely prevalent across the world. Addressing this issue will not only create economic empowerment, but will uplift future generations. Imagine the positive implications on society if we're able to alleviate poverty, provide greater access to quality education, and create higher standards of living. So, rather than function independently, policymakers in both host and source countries need to actively curb the unethical behavior of this network of middlemen and encourage a support system that directly matches employers and job seekers together and, more importantly, facilitates skill development. They must branch out beyond their comfort zone and engage in cross-collaboration with innovative initiatives in order to create more meaningful, sustainable impact for this community. It is time that blue-collar workers are treated not as commodities, but as human beings.